Hey, thanks for pressing play on this episode of the Brassy Broadcast. I'm your host, Jen Eads. I'm a musician, a student of the creative universe, and a curious girl full of questions. I'm also the head broad in charge at the Brassy Broadcasting Company, where I help good people of all kinds create and produce podcasts and other audio content that puts them in the ears, heads, and hearts of new audiences. You can listen to the entire back catalog of the Brassy Broadcast at brassybroad.com. And if you want to hang out and continue the conversation online, we can connect on Instagram and Twitter at BrassyBroadGen. And speaking of Twitter, I want to give a shout out to Wanda in Saskatchewan. I just wanted to say, Wanda, thank you for sharing the podcast out on the interwebs. I appreciate it. So anyone else, if you dig the show or a particular conversation really resonates with you, please share it. It really is very much appreciated. And if you're in Indianapolis and you want to hang out in person, come to a Crackhead Patty or Sister Threadgood show. Those are the acoustic duos that I play in around town. And you can find out where we're playing next on our Facebook pages. Now let's jump into this episode. My guest this week is Elle Roberts. Elle is a writer and alchemist, reimagining what is and creating what isn't. She's also the founder of She Hive, a grassroots gender equity project. I wanted to have Elle on the show so we could talk about community engagement. Now, I'm not talking about social media engagement. This isn't about how she's grown her Facebook group or Twitter page to gazillions of people. This is not about the people that live inside our phones. It's about the people in our neighborhoods and other physical communities. We talk about interacting with real people. Elle shares her experiences with She Hive as well as the House Life Project, a grassroots art-focused initiative based in an abandoned house on the Near East Side of Indianapolis. And through sustained relationships with local residents, the House Life Project reimagines a community liability, like a vacant house, as a community asset, a hub for arts and culture. In this episode, we laugh, we say some cuss words, we talk about the power of art to spur difficult conversations that make us kind of squirmy. We also talk about the different ways that mentorship can show up in our lives. Enjoy my conversation with Elle Roberts. Elle, welcome to the Brassy Broadcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So you're here because you are a girl that is out and about and super involved in projects all around Indianapolis. And we know each other from radio group and from Girls Rock Camp. So we have like the double bonus of we would have run into each other somewhere at some point. So the first thing that I want to start out with and asking you is what has inspired your community involvement?
That is such an existential question, actually. That is so cool. Okay. So I think where it started is since I finished up undergrad, I moved every year for about 4 years.
Really?
And it was cool for the time being because I didn't really have roots anywhere. And it was just cool to be in a place for a little while and then move on to the next place. And whatever life came with that particular place, I just did that. And before I moved here, I was thinking very intentionally around like, where do I want to be rooted? And it certainly wasn't in my hometown of Maryville, Indiana. I was there for a little bit with my dad. And I was trying to choose between Chicago and Indianapolis. And I chose Indianapolis because it is a city that has a small town feel. And I wanted to be just far enough from my family to have my space, but also be very connected with them and be close enough to where I can come home whenever I wanted to. And I learned very quickly, immediately after graduating from college, that like going far, far away is not actually the lane I want to be in. So just close enough was actually where I wanted to be. And Indianapolis has been that and then some. And for me, I think finding community has almost always revolved around the arts.
Mm-hmm.
And coming here as a musician more than anything else. And like, that's how I became embedded in community and how I've built relationships here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of grown outward from there.
Yeah.
Now it's a lot of different things.
What is it that you love most about Indianapolis?
Oh, wow. I love, gosh, I have such a long list of things I don't like. It would be good to think more about what I do. I really like how there is such a like small degree of separation between people. Like you always know someone who knows someone.
Yeah.
And that can be really frustrating and not great in some ways. But it's also, I think it's amazing a lot more, in a lot more ways. It makes it easy to build connections and to make this place home for someone who is not from here. That I was very grateful for that, and I still am.
Me too, because I grew up in a small town in southern Indiana, and even moving here, it's like it's just bigger.
Yeah,
but it still feels like you have your people,
yes,
and your community.
Exactly.
So let's talk about your community and all, like you do so much. So it's going to be kind of hard for me to focus.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. So like I actually did prepare and make a few notes.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to talk about is the House Life Project. What is that? How did you get involved?
Yeah. Well, this is kind of maybe the story about like how I always move a lot. And when I first moved to town, I lived on the northwest side, in Clifton on the river, and it was great. I loved the west side. I managed to live right around the corner from someone who gave me a job, so like that was really cool.
Nice.
And so it turned into kind of like an enclave of itself, like just neighbors and friends and all of those things, and kind of wanting to find that same space, even if I didn't live there anymore. I moved to the Near East Side after that as a fresh start. And I started She Hive, which we don't have to talk about right this minute, on the Near East Side at a coffee shop on 10th Street. And then it was called Tin Comet Coffee, and now it's called Rabble Coffee. And both were great. I just want to say that. I just love good coffee. And wanting to know, like, what would it be like to live, work, and play in a particular area, and to have the opportunity to do that through House Life Project was really exciting. And so it is I guess also a grassroots project, just a group of artists and neighbors and community leaders that use abandoned houses to build community, to make art, to engage in difficult conversations that can spur some action sometimes about affordable housing, about what things people are looking for when they want to make a home, and what attracts neighbors to a space, what pushes them out of a space. So how our neighborhoods are changing over time. And we are having those conversations through art primarily, because art is universal, and you can talk about a lot of things that people don't normally get the chance to talk about, or that make us really squirmy and uncomfortable. We do it through art. So we're essentially like professional squatters, which is like, that is a political thing in and of itself, because in that neighborhood, like there is a lot of squatting. And so because it's seen so much change that like when you need a place to live, that's just what you do. And so we're kind of like intentionally inserting ourselves in that narrative. Each of the houses that we have used, and we're about to move to our third house in the St. Clair Place neighborhood, is managed by Renew Indianapolis, which is the city's land bank. So these are all houses that have been abandoned, foreclosed on, in like tax limbo. And they are homes that the city is intentionally trying to sell to either private homeowners or ethical developers to rehab and make them available for rent or purchase on the Near East Side. And so we are kind of in those in-between spots for houses that have been kind of sitting empty for sometimes 10 to 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so it's a really purposeful thing in which we are kind of bringing life and kind of trying to unearth the stories about each house that has been and still is. So we're not rehabbing, we're not fixing it up other than to we need to make this space safe enough to hang out in. That's about it. And we spend most of our time on the porch. And so we do an open house every year in which we are soliciting commissioned pieces from artists that contribute to the space. And then we do programming pretty much 3 to 4 times a month. So we're having community conversations all around issues of housing and neighborhood change and all the moving factors that play into that. And then we're also hosting workshops, and artists are bringing their own programs into this space as well. So it's really, really cool and kind of this organic, messy thing that we're still in the process of making sense of, because it's year 3. I came on board year 2, so I've been on staff for a year now, and it's one of my favorite things to do. It really and truly is. It's one of the positions I didn't want to let go of in terms of my own professional development. Yeah.
How are you getting word out about it? Is it mostly within that particular neighborhood and community?
We have a website and all the, social media stuff. And so a lot of it is digital, but in terms of engaging community in the neighborhood, it's me literally walking around with flyers in my back pocket, talking to whoever at the grocery store up the street or at the TikTok Lounge, which is one of my favorite bars. Community engagement can look like doing karaoke on a Thursday night. So it's just that's what I end up doing. And I spend a significant amount of time in Rebel Coffee drinking caffeine instead of taking a nap, because that's just how it goes. But in the neighborhood itself, there's a lot of just face-to-face knocking on doors, and a lot of it ends up being when we're just on the porch, people are like, so what's going on over there? And just kind of come and hang out. And so I love it. It's so low key, and it kind of removes initial pretenses that other spaces tend to hold. And so folks that wouldn't normally interact in that neighborhood have space to do that, and are more comfortable, I think, doing it in a house where it's just we're just making art.
Yeah. It feels so non-threatening.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's the whole idea.
Have the neighbors been pretty receptive to you guys being there in the houses in the neighborhood?
There have been a lot of intentional conversations around that. And we've only chosen houses where we have built relationships with neighbors on either side, and being very careful not to be a nuisance or to feel like we are a burden on the space that we are occupying. And that looks like introducing ourselves and inviting neighbors immediately on that block to come on over and ask kind of, what are you looking for in a space like this? And how can we meet those needs? And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. We've done it twice now, moving into the 3rd house, and it's a little bit denser of an area that we're going to, even though it's just a block away. It's so interesting, block to block in Indianapolis, just how different things can be.
Oh, yeah.
We only have one neighbor that we've met who's come to the previous house. So we're building that relationship as time goes. Yeah.
What kind of impact have you seen then within the neighborhoods after you've been there for a while?
I think maybe just this week is probably a pretty sweet spot for us, in that we get to see how our relationships have developed over time. So we had our first porch party of the 3rd season last week, and to see folks that we were hanging out with at the first house And in our second year, like just kind of interact and collide with one another. It was so cool. It was bananas. There were so many people. I wasn't even expecting that because porch parties tend to be pretty low key. And this first one was just like, everybody was like, we're so ready for this. Yeah. It felt like a block party that was just kind of like pop up and impromptu and no one planned anything. And it was beautiful to see so many different people from different walks of life in that neighborhoods adjacent to that area. And then folks that are just like, I like art and this is a place where you do it. So I'm just going to come and hang out to just occupy that house and the porch and the yard and the street together. I think that is a testament to the work that we do. And we get to see kind of how our relationships with neighbors and leaders have blossomed inside of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How are you using art then to actually start those difficult conversations? And what does that look like? And how do those kind of evolve out of that?
Yeah. So this year we're kind of transitioning to a new model in that being more intentional about doing our homework as artists, because I think neighborhood change tends to be like artists tend to be the forerunners of that. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of natural. Like we see it happen in Broad Ripple. We're seeing it happen in Fountain Square. Yeah. It is happening on the Near East Side and so on and so forth. Like there's so many little pockets of areas where that's happening. And artists tend to like just need a place to live and maybe be intentional about like, oh, this is an area that I want to live in versus like, oh, it's cheap rent over here. And then like, let's do cool shit. And then like people are like, oh, there's some cool shit over there. And then like, and then the wave comes, right? And then the artists tend to be the first pushed out. And it's so interesting to play both of those roles and to be like, wow, how can we think more carefully about this? And like, how does art catalyze that process, and how can we use art to resist that process at the same time? And I think Fountain Square is a pretty good like example of like artists who are just like, nope, we're not going to do that, and like taking a stand and making art that speaks to how a neighborhood changes and how art can flip that on its head at the same time. And so here in this particular space, it is not necessarily like overtly political, but something like, for example, last year, one of our resident artists built a replica of a table that his great-grandfather, I believe, built that stayed in his family for many, many years. And he just basically elongated it so that it stretched from the porch and like, he built it so that it looked like it was going through the house. So it went from the porch all the way to the backyard, like cool. A long table. And it captures, I think, his own family history, but also thinking about this is the cornerstone of the family home. And when you are building community, like you need a place to come and gather. And so many of the activities that we had that weren't related to the table at all, we were just using it because it was there. It felt like family dinner, and it was family dinner in a lot of ways. And that's like probably the perfect example of like, this was a very intentional piece of art made to capture a lot of different narratives. And then its practical use even extended that then some, and got us thinking about, okay, we need more spaces where we can gather together and do more and eat more and talk more. And we're going to do it at a table. And just thinking about my own background as a youth worker, I learned very early on that so many of my students, when I was in youth work, didn't get that time at all. And so sitting down to eat dinner every day with my kids was like, it was ritual. We had to do it because it's like, it's a program and like, you got to serve dinner. But the importance of that time every day to like talk about, how was your day? How are you? How are you feeling? How can I show up for you? Like those kinds of conversations don't happen often enough because of like, mom has to work 2 or 3 jobs to make rent. And like, sometimes that just means like I have to sacrifice this time to make sure that like the lights stay on.
Right.
And so those conversations didn't happen as often as perhaps maybe developmentally are needed. And we're in a neighborhood in which like that is very much the case, and not coming at it from like a deficit point of view, but like, what are the assets here, and how can we come alongside families that are seeing a lot of change, like not just in the neighborhood, but like within the home, and how can we be a space to have more conversations about that? And a lot of them have had like we're going to hang out on the porch and talk about this really hard thing. Or we're going to sit around this table and eat some fried chicken. Like we're going to do that. And so it's a cool, like kind of roundabout way of like, how do we build like that uncomfortable comfort and like lean into it and see where it goes.
Have you actually seen change then happen as a result of some of those conversations?
Yeah, totally. And sometimes it's as big as like, I'm going to purchase a Renew house. And I know how to do that now because like y'all have that whole process like kind of in house. Like that's great to be able to walk someone through that process. And sometimes it's like, we know of a particular resource that because of who we are in community and how we are working specifically with organizations and leaders in the area to be kind of a through line for folks that like, this is a need that I have. I don't know how to get it met. And I don't even know where to go to ask that question. And like, if it comes up organically in conversation, well, you can go up the street to Bonner Center, and this is a program that they have available. And if you want somebody to go with you, like I can make time next week to do that. And like connecting neighbors to one another in that space, like something like I need a window fixed or a lawn mowed or like all of those little things happen there, like just connecting people to people and connecting people who need one resource or another to that resource and doing our best to kind of walk alongside. So, for sure. It happens all.
What would you say has impacted you the most having done this for a year now?
Yeah. Wow. I think for me, I think particularly the porch parties has changed my thinking around like how I want to exist in community. And that was a process, like I was kind of coming into that, I think, in moving here. So many houses have porches, like great porches. And that's not really a thing, really, in a lot of places where I've lived, whether it was like an apartment building and like you don't talk to your neighbors and like you just go straight to your building, straight to your door. And like, you don't even talk when you go to the mailbox, like that kind of thing. Is like, I have no idea who lives underneath me. And I don't know if I'm comfortable with that or if I'm comfortable like with that sense of distance. Right. Or like where I grew up in the suburbs, it's just like, I used to play outside as a kid. And then I don't know, like I became an adult and I'm just like, we go straight into our garages and like we just have our little home life. And then like when somebody knocks on the door, it's just like, who would knock on the door? Who would do that? I feel personally attacked right now. Who would do that? Like things that just kind of change over time and like reacclimating myself to that kind of community. Like I can go next door and ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar. Usually it's a beer, not a cup of sugar. I'm not using anything that requires sugar usually. Usually it's a beer. But I can do that and like specifically choosing where I want to live in this city based on like having that connection with people I'm living around and being able to do that in a lot of different spaces, because if you can do it in an abandoned house in the middle of nowhere, essentially you can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
Do you feel like also, too, just creating, in addition to that space, but also the time, do you feel like it's like, hey, I've got some time to actually play now and maybe something creative is going to get sparked?
Exactly. And I think that's another reason why I wanted to stay in this role, even as my personal professional life has changed, is because it keeps me in a space where I'm like, I'm not behind a screen or not in a cubicle or not wherever. And I'm like, oh, this is community engagement. Like that's exactly what it is. And it's like stretched my thinking around it. And I forget the time often when I'm there, which is like, wow, like what do office hours mean when I'm hanging out in an abandoned house with no electricity, no water, no toilet, like, and once my phone dies, it's just dead. Like, it's like, okay, cool. like let's figure out what that looks like in this particular space, and just like how not political that is, but how political that is. And that says a lot for me, I think. And like, I'm getting so much from the space, and I've always wanted that to be the case. Like wherever I am serving, wherever I'm putting my hands, like to gain something powerful from it that like deeply transforms me is like that I lead with that. Like if I'm putting way more into it than I'm getting out, then it is not the space for me.
Yeah, I think we need to be aware of that. And a lot of times we're not. And then we wonder why we're drained.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely.
I would also like to talk about She Hive and the work that you're doing there. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's my baby. I think it was, gosh, it's like a culmination of a lot of things in my own life. And then like to see it grow has been amazing. But I guess I should just start with like, okay, what is it? She Hive is a grassroots project in which we deconstruct gender inequity. And that looks like three different things. The kind of more regular thing are meetups like once or twice a month, where we are just reading material related to gender, sexuality, race, and class, and holding up in a coffee shop or Ash and Elm Cider, which is also on the Near East Side. I just want to shout them out because they have a great cider.
Oh, that's good to know.
They do. I don't know what you call a cider brewery. Is it just a cidery? Like I don't know. I don't know.
Okay,
that's
a
tangent, but it's a cidery, and I love it. And they let us hang out in there a lot. And we just talk about those gender issues and how they intersect with other parts of our identities as women, as femme identifying people, and do our best, I think, maybe because it's less a book club and more of a like, how do I apply these things to my everyday life? Like how do we as a community of people make Indianapolis or like whatever neighborhood we live in and work in, play in, better for women folk? And that's kind of the focus there. And then we do workshops that are also related to that. And those are gender exclusive, I guess I should say. So anyone who identifies as a woman can just come to that space and engage in it. And then we do a visual and performance art show called Women Through 17. And that's kind of how the whole shebang started. Like,
really?
Yeah. Being a musician myself, and then my co-founder, not of She Hive, but of Women Through 17. We were both public allies at the time. So we were like digging our heels into AmeriCorps greatness. And I joke all the time, like, you're supposed to be a community leader that's like gaining all of this knowledge and like do all these professional development trainings. And like, I had a great year. I'm not going to lie. I ended up being a receptionist essentially at the organization I work for. So I was real bored, but bored wasn't a bad thing. Like I was like, I got to put my energy somewhere. Like, let's do a thing. And so we ended up doing a First Friday show at Tin Comic Coffee. And it was for Women's History Month in 2014. And that was the very first Women Through 17. And we were just like flying by the seat of our pants. We're both musicians, and we're like, we know so many incredible women that are like doing cool shit. And like every flyer we see for whatever show, it's just like maybe one or like all of 0 women on the bill. And like thinking about who gets paid for gigs and who has the network to be able to get into different spaces. And like so many incredibly talented women are left out of conversations or go unpaid. And to have a space where it's like, this is just for women, and we are going to highlight the work that so many talented folks are doing. And we started out as just like it's going to be a one and done. Woo.
Yeah.
And then people were like, so when's the next one? I'm like, are you going to plan it? Because it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. And it was curated to a certain degree in that, like, I knew who was performing and I'm like, this is the time you have. And like, I'm seeing the show for the first time with everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so you never know what you're going to get.
Right.
And to kind of put some bones on it, like doing it by theme helped us kind of guide our thinking, like, oh, what do we want to be thinking about inside of this? And like, what do we want people to leave the space with? Because it's fine to just do a good show.
Sure.
But I think any space in which you're just like, this is for X, Y, or Z, to come into it with like, this is a goal that we have. We want people to be feeling this way when they leave, mm-hmm. or to be thinking about this thing when they leave. And see what happens with that. And so we're 3 years in now, and we just wrapped our 10th show. So we celebrated our 3rd anniversary, 10th show, April 1. So that was just the beginning of this month.
Yeah. Happy anniversary.
And it's been an incredible ride, and it's shifting and changing, and it has been shifting and changing as I think my politics have developed over time. And She Hive is not me, but I also know that like when you have a brainchild, like it's okay that it has a little bit of your brain.
Yeah.
And so it has changed and will change as I'm like in a spot where I'm like, oh, I made a thing that I don't have to do all the things, mm-hmm. and like take a step back from it and like see my child walk away. Like that's really, really cool. Yeah. Like it's growing up, and that means that like, oh, my role is less to be like protective and all of that. But now it's like, I get to just be a guide in a way and just kind of like see where it goes and who it touches from here on out. And that's been an exercise in letting go for mm-hmm, me, because like sure. That's been hard, and I've been thinking about it for like 1.5 years. So it's like, oh, this is like a whole process for me. And then like for this show, I announced that I wasn't gonna be hosting Women 317 anymore, mm-hmm. And like that was like a big deal. And I'm just like, I don't make any decisions like that lightly at all. I was like, I've been thinking about this for like a year, and to take a step back from that is just opening it up for more growth and to change as people need it to change.
Do you feel like, too, though, that also gives you an opportunity to maybe step into like a mentorship role or a role of guidance and kind of then help groom, that, I don't know if it's the next generation, but the next, those behind you to step up and take more of a leadership role?
Yeah. And it's so interesting, like, thinking of myself as someone who is in that position when like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I felt very differently. Like I want to be mentored and like, am I in a position to like help someone the way I've been helped along the way? And I'm like, wow, yeah, actually I am, and have been doing that without necessarily calling it that. Mm-hmm. But it's just interesting for me is like, I'm coming into my 28th year. I'm like ankle deep in it now. And I'm like, woo, okay. And it hasn't been like a pivotal year or anything like that. Like, oh, okay, I'm 28. That's cool. But maybe I think for me, like the closer I get to 30, I'm like, I feel like there's a shift there in which I feel more adult than I ever have. Mm-hmm. And like, I think I'm always going to feel like I am not doing the adulting thing well. So it's not that I'm like, oh, I've got a handle on this. It's like, no, actually, I have no idea what I'm doing still, but more of a, like, I know something that I can share with people, and being more intentional about how I don't need to be at the front of things anymore. And that's been a lot of like self-reflection and checking my own ego. It's just like, do you need to be at the center of this? Like, no, you don't. And like, why do you want to be? And like, you need to interrogate yourself inside of that, because it doesn't leave space for anything or anybody else. And then it kind of chokes out the thing that you love. Right. And And it's like, I don't want SheHive to be me. So I need to evaluate what is my role in this and how do I do a better job of like checking my own ego inside of that? And like, how do I do a better job of sharing what I know and letting that blossom as it will? So, yeah. Ooh.
That's heavy for 28.
I'm just going to keep doing that every year for the rest of my life.
Well, and I can tell you just in my 45th year, I still don't have a hold on the whole being a grown-up.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if you feel like you've got that mastered, then there's probably something missing from your life.
Oh, yeah. Something is horribly, horribly wrong.
Yeah, you're not having any fun.
That's real. Totally.
Who would you say has been instrumental in being a mentor or a guide to you, even if maybe you didn't necessarily think of them in that light?
Yeah. A couple of people. And sometimes I say this out loud and sometimes I don't. And something about like role models or like people that I've looked to, even if I'm not necessarily like sitting at their feet, like, please teach me, but like watching what people are doing. And I have a list of a few people. Before I moved here, I learned of, I connected with someone on Twitter. I tend to do that. Like I find people on Twitter. I'm like, one day we will meet in real life. And like, it's happened so many times. And like, yeah, a good amount of my friends, I should not say that out loud. Like, don't meet randoms off of Twitter. Don't do that. But like, I have a really good track record inside of that. It's just, I do it on Facebook too. It's fine. I've got a good track record. But this woman, her name's Melina Jeffers, and she is an artist and a curator, and she is like all of what I was like, ooh, that is community building. And I want to do that. I was just like kind of watching her from afar, and we had like, I don't know, we ran in the same circles at one point or another. And to meet her in person, I was like, don't do that thing where you're just like, I'm meeting a person that like, I know everything about, sort of. It's like, don't be weird. Don't be weird. I managed not to be weird. But to see her work grow over time, and like, even she started a project called Mosaic City, and like, even watching her go through the process of like, oh, this is a thing that needs to end now. And to see that happen in real time was a beautiful lesson for me. Mm-hmm. Even again, like I was not sitting at her feet like, let's go get coffee so I can learn things from you. But it's more of a like, we're colleagues, I suppose, in this work. And like to see something that like I so admired come to an end because like, oh, I'm moving in a different direction now. And I've never witnessed that before. Like, this is a thing that needs to end, and this is how I'm going to end it, and be very intentional inside of that. And I learned that from her, and I've never told her that, but that's a thing. Another person, Denicia Malone, to watch her start a thing has been really, really cool. Another person that I was like, you're cool on Twitter, and like watching from afar and like trying not to be the weird person. And we've interacted far more and like had a lot more conversations about what does it mean to practice the craft of art making and creating a space and all those things that I think we do really well, but just in really different ways. And it's cool to learn from someone who just has a totally different mind process, and like how she goes through making a space is so different from how I do it. And like to glean from that has been such a blessing. And then to see her start a project has been super cool, because I'm like, oh, wow, SheHive started so differently. And like, oh, I had done that. And like, it's not a shoulda, coulda, woulda thing, but like, it's never too late to just like do a new thing. And it's a cool thing to start and watch grow
what's
over
her
time. It's called, okay, so this is like a total moment where I'm like, I'm probably gonna fuck this up. But it's spell. I'm gonna spell it first because it's important, because I used to spell it wrong, and then I'm like, okay, it's ROHK, and I think it said Rook is how you say it, but it's a space creating project organization. I don't want to like project my own weird words onto it, but they make spaces. So like anywhere from like, we're going to do a community dodgeball game to like, we're going to have a listening party for Kendrick's new album. It's just cool spaces. And for a long time, she did this kind of huge festival called the Uprising. And that's kind of how I got introduced to the music scene in a more official capacity. It's always been bananas. Like it's like an experience. Like you are going to have an experience here. It's not just a good show. And learning that from her is just like, oh, all of my insane ideas in the margins of my notebook could be a thing, and it's fine. It's fine because like somehow she makes it happen. It's like call someone like I need 10 chickens. I need 2 huge like drum fans. I need laser pointers. And I'm just like, where is this going? And it's just like, I'm going to have a good time. That's what it means. So it's cool kind of watching her do that. And those are just a couple of people. I think maybe I have a lot of conversations with dead people as in like through books. I read a lot. And Zora Neale Hurston has been a person for me. So much so that like, I feel like we have conversations through her stories. Like, I feel like she's talking to me and I'm just like, this is the coolest thing ever. Just, she speaking of being like a fake anthropologist, like she was a real one. She was a real one. Like, I don't want to say that. Like, she's not a fake anthropologist, but like someone
like you want to be when you grow up.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like capturing like someone who was literally going into the field and capturing the stories of Black people of her time. And she laid the foundation for so many brilliant thinkers and writers and activists and really is kind of a forerunner for all the things that I want to be, am doing, becoming. I don't know. But she's like a mentor for me in that, which is so weird to say because it's just like she's not alive anymore. But the legacy that she left behind is not just inspiring, but like, oh, this is like kind of a blueprint of like how to be a badass and like just do it. So I'll keep it short. 3 people that feel solid. So yeah, those are kind of folks that I'm like, these are people that I look to inform my work.
Well, and speaking of legacies, what are you hoping is going to be the legacy that you leave?
So many
no pressure on that.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a great question. I've been thinking a lot about this and mostly been conversations with my girlfriend and my journal and sometimes God, depending on how I'm feeling. It just depends. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. But what I want to leave behind is kind of a continuation of the tradition of asking questions and saying words out loud. And I think as I'm here kind of stretching how we use words to not only document, but to envision and imagine a future that we can't yet see. And that is like a long line of people and stuff that has done that. And I want to put myself squarely in that context because it did not exist inside my own head. Like those are all things that I've gained from other people and have really thought a lot about and then talked a lot about and then thought a lot about and felt a lot about. Like, it's just a never ending process. In terms of maybe like a thing I want to leave behind, I want to be a writer. I want to write books. That feels really plural. It feels very plural. But I want to kind of bridge this odd gap between like thinkers and doers, in which like so many people are both, can be both, and like, and then thinking about She Hive in terms of like, I'm looking to people like Audre Lorde, who were like, she was doing a She Hive kind of thing in her later years in life. And for for me inside of it, and her to be a poet, and it's just like, the arts, like it's, ooh, some people just speak to you in a certain kind of way. Like she rejected this idea that she was a scholar, even though she was coming up with like profound ideas and developing them. And I think part of it is just like, I'm not a professor teaching in a classroom, but you can make a classroom literally anywhere you are. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I practice as well. And so continuing to bridge that gap with writing, with building community, creating spaces where like, we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to talk about what it means to like go home and like do it. And then we're going to do it. To leave that behind, I think would be a testament to people who came before me, and I get a way to honor my own work and like time and energy that I put into that. Cause it's so much of kind of where we are right now, where we like celebrate the individual and like just hype that up so much. And it's just like, nope, I'm in a community of people and there's like a long history behind me. And like, even the things that I'm doing, it was just like, there's so many hands inside of it, but just like, I don't want to be the face of the thing. And if I have to be, like, I'm going to be talking about the fact that it is not just me doing this. And to celebrate that. But then also knowing that so many brilliant Black women died without being celebrated in that way. Mm-hmm. And I'm not interested in dying like a Zora Neale Hurston. I'm not interested in being penniless. And I'm not interested in like, in being undervalued for so long until. And it's just like, I want to be here to dwell in that a little bit, not to toot my own horn that much. Like I want to check the individualism as it happens, but like also giving myself credit where it's due. And like, yeah, I'm going to celebrate that. And like, be like, damn, I'm proud of myself. Like, that's cool.
And you should. Yeah. You should totally celebrate that.
Yeah. Yes. So that's what I want to leave behind. I do. I want to leave words, and I want to leave the remnants of those spaces that I've created. It's just like, oh, wow. Like it's like a ripple effect. It's just like, if not for this particular space, maybe we wouldn't be thinking about this thing and how it's connected to all these other things in this particular kind of way. I want to leave that behind, whatever that means. I hope it keeps going.
And I think we'll just leave that right here with the open invitation to please come back, because I feel like we're going to have a lot to talk about down the road.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Elle Roberts, thank you so much for coming by today.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun. I love conversations like this, because then I'm like, I get to reflect on like what I'm doing and how I feel about it. So thank you.
Thanks for listening. I feel like this was a really important conversation. Here are my takeaways and action steps. Number 1, I need to put my damn phone down and be more intentional about creating face-to-face community and engagement with the people around me. I also need to get out of my neighborhood and do a better job of exploring my city. I see a trip in my future to the Near East Side of Indianapolis. I love coffee and cider. I'm missing out by not venturing out of my little neighborhood bubble. And I have to say, I never thought of karaoke as community building. It got me thinking about how, as a musician, the people that come out to my shows are really an important part of my community. And what can I do to better serve them? How can I be a connector within that community of people that are there supporting me? For all of today's show notes, visit brassybroad.com. Now put your phone down, get out in the world, and do some good.